Revenge with Karen.
Monday morning punched me in the gut before I'd even finished my first sip of coffee. Payroll flagged 3 departments with unpaid invoices. 2 clients were threatening to walk over billing discrepancies, and the intern left a post-it that read Tyler's lunch refund, urgent. No context, no receipts. Just Tyler's damn name again like a fart in an elevator, lingering, pointless, and ruining everything. Tyler, if you're lucky enough not to know him, is the CEO's son. Think trust fund baby meets mid-tier frat boy energy. He once called the copper the paper microwave. Our last CFO called him a financial cautionary tale in designer sneakers. Now imagine me, Samantha, senior ops manager, 6 years deep into this bureaucratic hell pit, still duct taping this company's books together, while Tyler bounces from Miami to Malibu claiming executive oversight like it's a Peloton class. That morning was running triage. One eye on an Excel sheet that looked like a murder scene, the other on my inbox pinging like a slot machine on Adderall. AP was behind again. Contractors were threatening to halt work. And as usual, nobody was tracking Tyler's discretionary spending, because apparently being born into the right sperm stream makes you immune to audits. I opened up the month's corporate card log and nearly sprained a vein in my forehead. Mango bottle service, $1,100. Cabo flights refundable, $4,800. No client notes, no approvals, just vibes and visa charges. But I didn't explode. I haven't exploded in years. I just fix things quietly, invisibly. I'm the office's janitor in pearls, scrubbing away the mess before anyone notices it stinks. The one thing keeping me upright, that leadership summit. Full ride, all expenses paid. Finally approved after 3 years of waiting. HR confirmed it Friday. I'd even printed the agenda and taped it to my fridge next to the cat's insulin chart. I'd picked out my first new blazer since 2017. For once, the company was going to invest in me. That summit was more than a work trip. It was validation. A signal that maybe, just maybe, they saw me. But let's pause here for a hot second. If you've made it this far and your blood pressure's rising in spiritual solidarity, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button and give this story a like. Not because we need to feed some algorithm god, but because every time you do, it reminds the team that these stories matter. That being overlooked, overworked, and underestimated is seen. Now, back to our regularly scheduled emotional arson. Tuesday, 9:14 a.m. Weekly ops sync. Everyone dialed in except Tyler, who showed up 8 minutes late wearing mirrored shades and chewing gum like he was auditioning for Mentos commercial. He dropped into the Zoom like a pigeon in a wedding cake. Loud, messy, and unwanted. We went through budgets, vendor reports, headcount allocations. My summit wasn't on the agenda, so I wasn't worried. Then, casually, like he was asking for extra ketchup, Tyler dropped the bomb. Oh, and just a heads up, cut Samantha's summit travel. Budget constraints. Sorry, that was it. No warning, no conversation, no eye contact, just boom, trip gone. A tiny chuckle from someone in HR, the kind people make when they're trying not to visibly wince. Dead air. Nobody said a word. My face went hot. I was still smiling because I didn't know what else to do. Still nodding like a malfunctioning bobblehead, just trying to breathe through the shock. Managed to croak out a professional copy that before muting myself and staring at my keyboard like it might punch back. Now listen, I've eaten a lot of corporate crap sandwiches in my life. I've been skipped over for promotions. I've been told to smile more during compliance meetings. I've watched grown men get standing ovations for restating my strategy decks with bigger fonts and wider teeth. But this hit different. This wasn't just another work slight. This was personal. I sat there in silence as the meeting droned on about office snack budgets and Slack etiquette, feeling something old and dangerous twist in my gut. I didn't cry. I didn't curse. I didn't even roll my eyes. But something in me clicked. You can only be overlooked so many times before invisibility becomes armor. And Tyler, he had no idea what he'd just triggered. The meeting ended with that hollow kind of silence that only corporate Zooms can produce. Half-hearted goodbyes, someone accidentally unmuted breathing like a pug, and me, sitting frozen in front of my monitor, blinking at the reflection of a woman who just got gut-punched by a man who probably thinks QuickBooks is an energy drink. I didn't leave my chair. I didn't slam anything or make a scene. I just stared at the screen as it faded to black, letting the cold fluorescent light of the office settle on me like dust. Budget cuts. That was his excuse. Budget cuts, said with the same casual cruelty as a waiter telling you they're out of pie. And the way he said it, eyes squinting like he was holding back a laugh, tone just one notch above smug, made it worse. Like he enjoyed the surprise. Like this was a game and I just got played. HR didn't say a word. God bless Michelle in HR, who once told me her biggest regret in life was getting bangs during the pandemic. She looked down at her notepad like it might burst into flames. Nobody else made a peep. Silence from the usual chorus of middle managers who'd forward my decks without reading them and slap their names on my audit prep like it was a bake sale prize. I slowly reached for my coffee, took a sip, and it was cold, fitting. I spent the rest of the day like a ghost in my own office, answering emails, cleaning up Tyler's vendor misfires, putting out fires with the tone of someone mentally standing on a ledge. I was polite, I was professional. I was corporate wallpaper, quiet, competent, and just textured enough to make the place look managed. But inside was scorched earth. The leadership summit had been the one thing, the only thing I had allowed myself to hope for. No, not just hope. Believe in. I had done the work. Written the pitch to justify the cost, showed ROI projections for travel-based training, gotten pre-approval from finance. HR signed off. It was mine. It was earned. And Tyler gutted it with a shrug. I didn't text anyone. I didn't rant. I didn't post a passive-aggressive quote about closed doors being divine redirection on LinkedIn. I just sat with it. Let it settle. Because here's the thing. When you've spent your entire career being the one who fixes other people's messes, there's a special kind of silence that follows betrayal. It's not confusion, it's clarity, it's the quiet before something seismic. Around 4:45 p.m., I got a Teams ping from Tyler's assistant. Hey, Tyler wants to know if we can expedite the invoice reconciliation for Q3. He's got some pressure from the board. The smiley face nearly gave me a stroke. I typed back, of course. I'll handle it, sent it, closed the chat. Then I opened my drawer. Bottom one, the locked one. Inside was the red binder. Now before you jump to conclusions, no, I didn't have some master revenge plan waiting in there like a Bond villain. I'm not that theatrical. What I did have, though, was structure, process, policy. The very things this company ran on while pretending they didn't exist. And somewhere in that binder, deep in the archives of financial continuity plans, risk mitigation frameworks, and one very specific clause, remembered something that might matter. Months ago, when Tyler was scrambling to look competent in front of the board during that whole liquidity scare, he asked for my help drafting a continuity plan. I did it, and like always, he didn't read a word. Just signed, smiled, and asked if I thought the board would be into his new cologne. I remembered printing 2 copies, one for legal, one for me. Because I don't trust cloud storage, and I really don't trust Tyler. I didn't pull the binder out yet. Just ran my fingers along its spine. That was the moment I felt it. The shift, not rage, not revenge, calculation. Because Tyler may have taken my trip, but I had taken notes. And I was done hoping. That night, I made the mistake of checking Instagram. I don't even know why I still had Tyler on there. Maybe because unfollowing would feel like admitting he occupied more headspace than I cared to admit. Maybe because I was hoping I'd see something, anything, that justified the way he cut me from the summit trip, like I was some random line item next to copier paper. What I didn't expect was to get confirmation that the budget cut was actually code for funding Tyler's personal bottle service tour of the Eastern Seaboard. There it was. A rooftop in Miami, tagged location. Tyler grinning like a lobotomized game show host, sunglasses on at night, holding up a magnum of champagne like he'd just cured polio. Behind him, a crowd of girls who looked like they'd wandered off a music video set, and one guy I recognized from sales trying not to look embarrassed. The caption read, "Celebrating New Beginnings bottle with popping cork #team wins #executive energy." But what really did it, what actually made my stomach turn, was the receipt. Because Tyler, in his infinite wisdom, posted a boomerang of the bottle arriving in a silver ice bucket with a receipt half visible behind it. Most people wouldn't notice. But I did. 4 digits, company card last 4, 0437. That's our card. The same card that couldn't afford to send me to a $900 leadership summit with a bulk rate hotel discount and 1 complimentary breakfast voucher. He was drinking my summit in a flute glass with gold flakes. I didn't throw my phone. I didn't text him. I didn't even screenshot it for blackmail. I just locked my jaw, closed the app, and sat perfectly still on my couch with the TV still playing some HGTV couple fighting over open concept kitchens. My cat jumped into my lap. I didn't pet her. I sat in that silence, the cold, crystal clear kind that follows a realization. This wasn't mismanagement. This wasn't incompetence. This was deliberate. I was done waiting for someone else to care. I got in my car. I drove back to the office. No traffic, just my headlights cutting through the dark like searchlights on a warfront. I parked in the back, the kind of parking reserved for ghosts and janitors and women like me who'd long stopped being seen. Up the elevator, past the fake ferns, into my office that smelled like stale printer toner and resignation. I unlocked the drawer, pulled out the red binder. Wasn't even dramatic, just a single click of the latch, the smooth slide of the drawer, the thud of weight in my hands. But to me, it felt biblical, like cracking open the ark, because this wasn't just paperwork. This was protection, policy, power hiding in plain sight. Flipping through those laminated tabs, I found it, the document from last year's cash crunch. I remembered the meeting, Tyler sweaty in a blazer too tight, begging me to help him impress the board by formalizing a financial contingency plan. I remember the way he rushed through the approvals, signing pages between bites of a tuna melt, eyes on his phone, while I read each clause aloud like a Sunday sermon. But there was one clause I didn't read out loud. Clause 14C. In the event that discretionary spending exceeds 10% of quarterly allocations, without documented justification, access to emergency operational funds shall revert to the controller listed in Exhibit B for a period not to exceed 90 days, pending board review. Exhibit B was signed by me. He never asked what that clause meant, never read past the word allocation, and I never reminded him. I took the binder, walked over to the copy machine, and made 2 duplicates, one for legal, one for my personal files at home. I added today's date, stapled an addendum noting observed discrepancies in Q3 spend, and initialed every page like a woman sharpening a blade. I didn't tell anyone, didn't send an email, didn't whisper it in the break room or leak it to finance. Because this wasn't about drama. This was structure. This was fact. And I'd built my career on facts. Tyler had spent company money on a champagne fantasy, but I held the receipts. It was a Thursday afternoon in March when Tyler shuffled into my office, eyes red, tie half undone, reeking of panic and Axe body spray. That was the first red flag. He only ever wore cologne when he was trying to impress someone. That day it was the board. "Sam," he said, drawing out my name like he was about to propose or confess to murder. "You gotta help me." I didn't look up right away. I was in the middle of reconciling 2 vendor accounts he'd screwed up with a double payment to the same influencer who'd posted exactly 1 blurry TikTok about our product and spelled the company name wrong in the caption. I kept typing. "What happened? We've got the board next week, and legal says we need a formal continuity plan or they'll delay the vote." I looked up. "You mean the vote to approve the emergency operating fund you're salivating over?" "Not salivating," he grinned, strategizing. I rolled my eyes so hard I nearly saw the back of my skull. "Tyler, you haven't completed a single continuity doc since you took over discretionary spending. You rejected the draft finance sent last quarter." He flopped into the chair across from me like a toddler collapsing on a beanbag. "Because it was boring, Sam. Just spreadsheet jail. I need something with bullet points, diagrams, vibes. Vibes," I repeated. "Pen, come on. You're the only person who actually knows where the bodies are buried around here. Help me, please." And because I am a moron in a cardigan with a savior complex, I helped him. We stayed until 9 p.m. that night. I drafted the whole thing, clean tables, risk tiers, definitions of discretionary misuse. He nodded through most of it, yawning and checking his phone every 6 minutes. Around page 14, I slid in a clause. Just one, tiny. Buried. Clause 14C. If quarterly discretionary spending exceeds 10% of allocated budget, without supporting documentation or prior approval, authority over emergency operational fund access shall revert to the designated controller listed in Exhibit B. Said reversion shall last 90 days or until board override is issued. Exhibit B, Samantha R. Lawson. He never asked what it meant, just signed the last page between mouthfuls of a turkey club and wandered off muttering something about calling his investment shaman. That clause lived in the red binder for months, untouched, unremembered, until now. I sat in my office under the yellow hum of the desk lamp, reading it again slowly, thoroughly. Then I opened my laptop, pulled up the latest Q3 discretionary numbers, and began cross-referencing. Line by line, transaction by transaction. Bottle service in Miami, flight to Vegas for partner outreach, a private driver for a 2-day trip to Phoenix that mysteriously aligned with his favorite EDM festival. I ran the totals twice, then a third time just to be sure. 12.4% over discretionary spend. 0 documented justification. No approvals on file, no departmental sign-offs. The clause was live. I pulled out a fresh audit log and updated the timestamps. Added notation, trigger condition met. Clause 14C activated. Reviewed by SRL. Then I highlighted the clause, flagged it, and slipped it into the front pocket of the binder with a printed copy of the latest quarterly spend breakdown. Every dotted line traceable. Every signature accounted for. Every single document tagged and verified. It wasn't just about proving Tyler wrong. It was about making sure there wasn't a single crack he could squeeze through. No, I didn't see that. No, it's just a draft. No, this is out of context. I'd watched that boy weasel his way out of accountability more times than I could count. But not this time. Not with this. This wasn't a trap. It was a seatbelt, and he'd unbuckled it months ago. I leaned back in my chair, binder heavy in my lap, and for the first time in years felt something like peace. Grim satisfaction. Cold, clean, quiet. The kind of satisfaction that doesn't come from vengeance, but from preparedness. Tyler had burned through 10% of our operating margin on parties and pretense. But I'd been building a paper fortress. And now, he'd finally wandered into it. Friday, 3:42 p.m. My inbox pinged with the urgency of a toddler slapping an elevator button. Subject line in all caps, urgent, $6K needed out. I clicked. Tyler. Need $6K covered from discretionary today or payroll delay hits Monday. You pull from temp account? We'll explain later. Just make it happen, THX. No greeting, no details. Just that trademark blend of chaos and entitlement, like a man who thinks the world runs on vibes and Venmo. I stared at the screen for a solid 10 seconds, then reached for the red binder without a word. It sat on my desk now, open to clause 14C like a loaded weapon nobody else in the building knew existed. My fingers brushed the edge of the page. Initials, timestamp, trigger threshold exceeded, fully binding. He needed $6,000, not for payroll, that was the bait. I'd seen this move before. Flash a business-critical fire drill late on a Friday to get fast compliance. Make the problem urgent enough, scary enough, and people stop asking questions. They skip the audit. They skip the forms. They save the day for a system built on last-minute scrambles. Except I didn't scramble anymore. I opened a new email. To Tyler B., Carson subject urgent $6K needed out body, check the red binder. I hit send. One line, no emojis, no hi Tyler, no explanation. Just 4 words that dropped like a manhole cover. Then I leaned back, closed my laptop, and waited. No reply came. Not in 5 minutes. Not in 10. Not by 4 o'clock. His calendar showed prep call W/dev team optional. Not by 4:30, when finance started logging off for the weekend, and the halls outside my office went eerily still, like the final seconds before a tornado siren. The silence was exquisite. I imagined him tearing through the office like a raccoon in a dollar store, opening drawers he's never opened before, pawing at locked filing cabinets, shouting for his assistant, panicking over every folder that doesn't have a QR code and a TikTok recap. Because here's what Tyler didn't realize. He'd never even seen the red binder. Not once. That night in March, I printed the docs and kept the only physical copy. Legal had the digital file buried in their shared drive under a naming convention I intentionally designed to make it look boring. FCP Audit Amendment V2 Final 5. DocX. Good luck with that, buddy. By 5:12 p.m., I heard hurried footsteps in the hallway heels, maybe one of the assistants. A panicked shuffle, then quiet again. I checked my email one last time before shutting down. Still no reply. The ball was no longer in my court. It was floating somewhere above the boardroom, ticking like a time bomb wrapped in paper clips and policy. The moment someone else asked why the $6,000 hadn't cleared, why payroll was about to be late, that's when the clause would go public. When Tyler would have to explain what happened. When someone would finally dig into his spending log and realize Samantha Lawson hadn't refused anything, she'd enforced a trigger he'd signed into existence. The beauty of it? I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to storm in with printouts and finger pointing. I just had to sit still. It's a special kind of power to be able to burn down someone's lies using only their own paperwork. Tyler didn't know it yet, but he just kicked off a chain reaction. By Monday, everyone would know. Monday, 8:27 a.m. My phone buzzed with a calendar update. Emergency finance session, 9 a.m., boardroom A. No subject, no agenda. Just that thin corporate dread between the lines that tells you someone's about to start sweating through their suit. I closed the message, opened the bottom drawer of my desk, and pulled out the red binder. Felt heavier now. Or maybe I just finally acknowledged its weight. 9 a.m. sharp, I walked into boardroom A. A few were already seated, Chairman Wells, face tight like he'd walked in on his retirement fund crying, Megan from legal, who looked like she'd been up all night clawing through the expense ledger, and Greg from finance, blinking like someone had thrown his calculator in a blender. Tyler wasn't there yet. Of course, I took a seat at the far end of the table. Not a power seat, not the head. Just the quiet corner I always took, where the view is best for watching men implode. The CEO arrived next, a man built entirely from pressed collars and plausible deniability. He gave me a tight nod. "Morning, Samantha." I nodded back, "Morning." Then the doors swung open and in came Tyler, late, loud, overcoloned, and underprepared. He was already mid-sentence. Look, I didn't know she'd interpret the clause like that. I assumed it was just some placeholder language. We've always had fluidity with discretionary. The chair raised a hand. "Tyler, sit." He did, but not before giving me a look like I'd thrown a wrench into his espresso machine. "Let's get to it," said Chairman Wells. "We're here to discuss the failure to release emergency funds on Friday, which, per Tyler, was due to Samantha's refusal to process." 6 pairs of eyes turned to me. I said nothing. Instead, I opened the red binder. I slid it deliberately across the glossy mahogany table toward legal. No flourish, no speech, just paper and fact. Megan from legal opened the cover, adjusted her glasses, and began reading. Chairman Wells tapped his pen. "Samantha, can you explain your rationale?" Stillness. I acted in accordance with Clause 14C, Financial Continuity Protocol, signed March 18 and 41 p.m. Trigger conditions were met. Discretionary spending exceeded 10.2% of Q3 budget without supporting documentation. The clause states control reverts to the designated controller for 90 days pending board review. I said it like I was reciting a weather forecast. Calm, precise. I let the paper speak. Greg from finance looked up sharply. "Wait. 10%, that's impossible. We only cleared," Megan held up a hand, "confirmed the numbers this morning. Tyler's charges last quarter, Miami, Phoenix, Vegas, none were coded with department tags. No memos, no receipts. Samantha's calculation is accurate." The CEO let out a long, deflating breath, and Tyler, he laughed, a desperate, shaky little thing that didn't reach his eyes. "This is insane," he said. "You're telling me I lost access because of a binder?" "No," I said, folding my hands. "Because of your spending." He opened his mouth, closed it again. Somewhere between his lizard brain and what was left of his corporate training, he realized this was not the room to improvise. Chairman Wells leaned forward. "Is this clause enforceable?" Megan didn't even blink. "It's signed. Time-stamped, on record. It's enforceable." The room fell into a silence so thick you could hear the HVAC humming overhead. No one moved. This wasn't just about $6,000 and more. This was about oversight, about trust, about what else might be buried in that ledger under client entertainment. Suspicion crept into the room like smoke under a door. Tyler shifted in his chair. "We've always had flexibility. Everyone knew that." "No," I said, "you assumed that." Another silence. Then Chairman Wells turned to me. "Samantha, do you have control over the emergency operational fund at this time?" "Yes," I said. "Is payroll covered?" "Yes. Processed this morning. On time." Greg's jaw slackened a little. "Processed it already?" I nodded. "Had the paperwork ready Friday night. That did it." Even Megan blinked, because I wasn't reacting. I had planned. That binder hadn't just been insurance. It had been inevitability, waiting, watching. Tyler slumped in his chair, muttering something about intention and miscommunication, but no one was listening. The oxygen had shifted. The board wasn't looking at him anymore. They were looking at me. Megan from legal flipped to the tab I'd marked in red. Her fingers were steady, but I caught the faintest hitch in her breath as her eyes locked on the clause. The room had gone unnervingly still, the kind of silence that only ever happens when people sense something irreversible is about to happen. She cleared her throat, sat upright, And read. Clause 14C. In the event of discretionary overage exceeding 10% of quarterly allocations without documented justification, all authority over the Emergency Operational Fund shall transfer to the undersigned controller listed in Exhibit B, effective immediately, for a term of 90 days, or until a board override is issued. She paused. Then, the document is signed and dated by Tyler Carson. March 18. 10:41 p.m. No one spoke. Tyler blinked like someone had just slapped him with a cold fish. Wait, he stammered, half rising from his chair. No, that was supposed to be a formality. Just a backup doc. We needed the board's blessing to get the account open. It wasn't meant to trigger anything. Megan kept her eyes on the paper. Intent doesn't override written agreement, Tyler. This clause is legally enforceable and currently active. But I didn't even read. He cut himself off. And there it was. The sentence that hung in the air like a confession carved in stone. You didn't read. You signed. You assumed Samantha. But old Samantha, the fixer, the doormat with a smile, would keep mopping up your messes forever. I didn't gloat. I didn't lean back or cross my arms or say anything. I just sat, still and centered, as the table slowly turned toward me. Vindication isn't loud. It's not some swelling crescendo of violins and applause. It's quiet, clinical, like a scalpel, and it cuts deepest when no one sees it coming. Chairman Wells tapped the table lightly, like a gavel without ceremony. So as of now, Samantha controls the Emergency Operational Fund. Megan nodded, yes, and has already resolved the payroll issue per her earlier statement. Tyler looked like he was trying to crawl out of his own skin. We can't just let her. She's not just her, snapped Greg from finance, surprising everyone. She's the reason our books weren't a crime scene this entire year. Someone chuckled, not kindly. Tyler tried again, his voice cracking just enough to expose the panic underneath. Look, this isn't about me. We've always had flexible spending. I was just trying to build momentum for Q4. The party was a team-building thing, and the Phoenix trip, stop, Chairman Wells said flatly. The temperature in the room dropped 5 degrees. This isn't about one trip or one bottle. This is about fiduciary neglect. Tyler looked around for backup, found only stone faces and turned eyes. The ones who used to nod along. The ones who laughed at his dumb jokes. They weren't laughing now. They were recalculating, repositioning, pulling away like oil from fire. I met his gaze, no triumph, no smirk, just stillness. He looked down at the table, where his own signature sat like a loaded gun pointed at his credibility. He'd buried me in invisible work for years, but I'd buried him in documentation. Paper doesn't blink. Chairman Wells looked to me. We'll need a compliance review by Friday. Full audit of Q3 discretionary. I've already started, I said. Of course I had. Tyler exhaled a sharp, panicked breath like he might throw one last Hail Mary, but whatever excuse he was brewing died on his tongue, because you can't spin your way out of a clause you signed. And for once in his life, Tyler Carson was out of charm, out of time, and out of power. Vote wasn't even formal. Just a sequence of unspoken understandings, exchanged glances, and one long sigh from Chairman Wells that seemed to carry the weight of every poor decision that had led us to this room. Well, he said, fingers steepled, voice dry as ash. Clause is binding. Payroll is met. I don't see a scenario where we dispute execution. A few heads nodded, some slow and reluctant, others brisk, grateful, like people realizing they'd been passengers on a plane flown by a raccoon in a business suit. Megan from legal flipped the binder closed with a quiet finality, hands careful, reverent, like she was sealing a tomb. Samantha, the chairman continued, turning to me now, until further notice, you are the acting controller of the Emergency Operational Fund. No ceremony, no applause. Just the transfer of weight from a sinking ship to the only person still rowing. I'm fine with interim, I said evenly. I'm not, he replied. That got a reaction. Tyler twitched in his seat. His eyes snapped to the chairman, then to Greg, then to me, as if willing someone to laugh and say this was all a deeply unfunny prank. But no one was laughing. No one even looked mildly amused. Let the record reflect, Megan said, already scribbling, Samantha Lawson is formally designated controller. Effective immediately. The room shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, just realigned, like gravity tilting ever so slightly in my direction. I'll have a transition checklist ready by end of day, I said, already opening my notebook. Of course you will, Greg muttered with something like admiration. And just like that, 6 years of quiet competence of being the person who stayed late, cleaned the mess, rewrote the reports no one read but everyone relied on, was finally visible. Not praised, not paraded, just recognized, which for someone like me was louder than any standing ovation. Tyler, meanwhile, had gone curiously still. All that frat boy confidence drained from his posture, replaced by something smaller, rattled, redundant. Chairman Wells didn't even look at him when he said, "Finance, please suspend Tyler's discretionary access until further notice." Cards included. Greg was already typing. On it. "Wait, what?" Tyler's voice cracked down the middle. "You're cutting me off." "Can't." The chairman didn't look up. "You did that yourself." Megan slid a small stack of printed screenshots across the table, exhibit backups, paper trail receipts, digital timestamps to go with the binder. Tyler reached for them, skimmed the top page, then recoiled like the ink burned. "Is this really how we're doing this?" he said, but it sounded more like a plea than a protest. Still, no one answered, because the decision had already happened. There was no debate, no redemption arc, no hallway epiphany. Just paperwork and policy, and a signed clause he never read. He slumped back, jaw tight, tapping a finger against the table like a man trying to restart a rhythm that had already ended. I didn't gloat, didn't nod, didn't even look in his direction again, because this wasn't about him anymore. This was about restoring control, not just of the fund, but of myself, my role, my value. Years of silent work that no one clapped for, but everyone depended on. And now they saw it. Not because I shouted, because I documented. They say revenge is best served cold. But what I served that day wasn't revenge. It was accounting, with interest. Megan wasn't the one who finished reading the clause aloud. That honor went to the firm's external counsel, James Whitmore, a man so stiff he made paperclips look emotionally unstable. Pulled him into the boardroom mid-morning after someone, probably Greg, quietly suggested they needed outside eyes on what had just unfolded. The stakes were too high, the optics too volatile. Whitmore arrived in a tailored gray suit, salt and pepper hair combed with surgical precision, and an expression like someone who just licked a battery. He didn't greet anyone, just asked for the binder, sat down, and began reading from the middle. For 10 minutes, could hear nothing but the quiet rustle of paper and Tyler's, leg bouncing under the table like a drum solo in a panic attack. Then Whitmore reached clause 14C. He read it once, silently. Then again, this time aloud. In the event of discretionary overage exceeding 10% of quarterly allocations without documented justification, all authority over the Emergency Operational Fund shall transfer to the undersigned controller listed in Exhibit B. His voice caught slightly on the next line. Not dramatics, not nerves, just gravity, effective immediately for term of 90 days or until a board override is issued. He paused. The room waited. His hand, holding the page, began to tremble. "It's airtight," he said, softly. 3 syllables that detonated like a depth charge beneath Tyler's seat. Tyler's mouth opened, but no words came. Just a small, sickly exhale. His skin had gone a shade paler than the collar of his shirt, eyes glassy, fixed on the document like it was a betrayal written in his own blood. Because it was. Because he'd signed it. Because that bottle service in Miami, that rooftop post, that stupid photo with the receipt half visible behind a flute of Dom Perignon, that was the match. That was the moment. All it took to collapse the illusion of control was his own arrogance and the time stamp on an Instagram story. He looked at me, not with anger, with dread, like someone finally realizing they'd been playing checkers while the other player built a guillotine. I didn't smile, I didn't blink. I simply said I documented everything. You just never looked. No one else spoke. The silence wasn't awkward. It was earned. Because this wasn't revenge. Not the kind Tyler would have dished out. Petty, loud, fueled by insecurity and impulse. This was structure. Patient, quiet, precise. A system he thought was boring. A binder he never opened. A woman he never saw. I stood up, gently closed the red binder, tucked it under my arm like the sacred text it was, and walked out. No applause. No music swelling in the background. Just the click of my heels against the tile and the soft, rhythmic thump of justice being carried in 8.5x11. As I reached the hallway, I glanced back through the glass wall of the boardroom. Tyler was still seated, staring at his phone. That rooftop post on the screen, the one that sealed his fate. The Magnum bottle, the receipt. The caption, #executive energy bottle with popping cork. He looked like he might vomit. I turned away, kept walking. Out of that boardroom, out of the shadows, into whatever came next. Binder in hand. Quiet. unbothered, complete. You're the real stars of the corporate jungle. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe, or I'll flick the switch on your old cubicle memories.